Well, welcome to the Daily Climate Show. Coming up, EU countries warn of moving back to coal-fired power plants to tackle Russian energy crisis. The UN moves a major biodiversity summit from China to Canada. And heavy rainfall in China and other parts of Asia forces thousands of people out of their homes. Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show, where we report on the impact of climate change, hear from those most affected and track the changes that are responsible for those impacts on the planet. Well, first, last year's government around the world committed to help tackle climate change, and a big part of that was phasing out the use of dirty fossil fuels as an energy source. But the war in Ukraine has exposed a reliance on Russian gas, and as that supply gets ever more restricted, it's caused an energy crisis and soaring prices for households. Now, some countries in the European Union are warning that they'll need to move to emergency measures and shift their reliance back to coal. So let's take a look, shall we, at what's being suggested. So, Austria's government has agreed to convert a gas-fired power plant to use coal in the face of an energy emergency. Germany announced on Sunday its latest plan to boost gas storage levels and said it could restart coal-fired power plants that it had aimed to phase out. Now, the Dutch government has announced that coal-fired energy plants in the Netherlands will be allowed to increase their production as part of efforts to reduce reliance on Russian gas. And Italy says it may declare a heightened state of alert on gas this coming week if Russia continues to curb its supplies, which could ramp up the production at coal-fired plants. Well, I'm joined now by our correspondent, Charlotte Lomas. So what we're hearing here, Charlotte, is there is a reluctance to leaning on coal in the EU, for the short term at least.
There is a reluctance, but this is the reality. This is the challenge that is facing European ministers, with Russia really squeezing its grip on European gas supplies. Many ministers across Europe have now said that they have no choice but to reconsider coal power plants as an alternative energy supply, just when many countries were hoping to phase that out. And as you mentioned, coal is one of the greenhouse gases that just produce the most pollution. It's known as a dirty energy source. So it will be a reluctant decision. One minister said has been a painful decision, but that is the challenge that they're facing. It could be a stopgap, as you mentioned. The big question is whether this will delay that transition away from the use of fossil fuels.
OK, Charlotte, thank you very much for that. Well, let's take a look at the day's other climate news and to China now, where hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes as the south of the country experiences its heaviest rainfall since 1961 in Shaoguan City. The flood alert was raised to its highest level as authorities asked residents living along the riverbanks to move to higher ground. Well, the summer rainy season happens every year in China. Climate change can bring heavier and more frequent downpours. Well, all of this comes as Bangladesh and northeastern India continue to deal with extreme flooding. Authorities say they're struggling to reach more than 9.5 million people who have been stranded with little food and water. And the unusually heavy monsoon rains have killed dozens of people over the past 2 weeks. And more than 100 temperature records could be broken in the United States this week as a heat wave continues, and most of the population will see temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius, with the southern and eastern regions seeing the hottest temperatures. Meanwhile, firefighters in New Jersey have continued to battle a forest fire which has consumed over 7,000 acres. Now, it's all down to dry and windy conditions, meaning the initially small fire began to spread very quickly. Now, the average price for petrol and diesel has risen to a new high, according to the RAC. The average price of unleaded is now 188.74 pence per litre, while the price of diesel is at 196.36 pence per litre. An RAC spokesman said that while the price of diesel is likely to keep rising, they expect retailers to start reducing the price of petrol in response to a fall in wholesale costs. Now, chances are you would have heard of the COP summits that happened and all focusing on climate, like the one held in Glasgow last November. Well, the United Nations also holds another COP, meaning Conference of Parties on Biodiversity. And this year, it's just been announced that the summits will be moved from China to Canada because of the Chinese zero COVID policy. Well, here to tell me a little bit more about the summit itself and that last-minute change of location is Mark Goff. He's the CEO of the Capitals Coalition, which has been involved in meetings leading up to COP15. Thanks for joining us, Mark. So this delay of 2 years, the team will have so much to get through, but how much of that will you be able to achieve now?
Well, I think it's really important that we do move this to Canada, and that's been key because we've already lost 2 years of this 10-year plan that we were trying to set out. So it's really important we start moving towards getting to some solutions. The climate COP is obviously extremely important, but biodiversity, we've already lost 83% of our wild animals, 50% of plants. There's another 1 million species that are under threat. So this is the basis of all of the dependency that we have in life, and it's really essential that we get this bit right.
And what big aim do you want to achieve? I've been reading around this story and there are a few people that say, you know, that 2-year delay lost momentum in really making a change.
It's lost momentum on getting to the final decision, but it's allowed a lot more countries to actually start having discussions around what is important. And we're talking about something here which is very difficult to get your head around. It's about a local issue. It affects people locally, unlike climate, which is a big issue, that 1 ton of carbon is the same all around the world. What we're talking about here is something which is local to people. What we're really aiming for is a global goal, agreement across all of the countries for a nature positive, but also equitable and climate neutral approach. And by nature positive, we mean that there's more nature by 2030 than there is now.
Indeed. What would be your message, Mark, to world leaders? Because I suppose the success of COP26 was that big world leaders turned up and were involved. And this will be after COP27 in Egypt. It also clashes with the World Cup. What would you say to leaders whose attention might be elsewhere at this time?
Well, one thing, World Cups are going to happen again. This is only a once in a decade at least discussion. So maybe give up the World Cup tickets to come to this one. We do need to get the world leaders there. We do need to get the commitments. But we have started seeing this and the connection between the climate COP, where 92% of the nationally determined contributions that countries set included nature. So these things aren't separate. They're all interconnected. So we have to get this one right. World leaders have to be there at this one to get that overarching agreement around the world.
And very briefly, Mark, what are your thoughts on that move then? We said it at the beginning, from China to Canada.
Well, like I say, I mean, I'm really pleased that the Chinese government has agreed to move it to Canada so we can get on and do this. COVID has been such a disruption to so many people around the world in so many ways, not just because of this biodiversity conference, but we do need to move on with it. And the fact that actually we're finding solutions, that the Chinese government is finding a solution here, that Canada is picking it up, that the other countries are coming together, and organizations like Business for Nature, which are bringing those businesses to that conversation, are going to be essential. 90% of those businesses want that mandatory requirement for reporting on this to change those subsidies that are in there, the $1.8 trillion of subsidies that are going in the wrong direction. So all of those efforts that are being made have to come together. And now we've got a venue, now we've got a time, now is the time to look for that nature positive, climate neutral, equitable future.
OK. Mark Goff, great stuff. Thanks for talking to us today. Well, that's all from us for today. Thanks for watching.